South Korean. Studied in South Korea and Paris. He won the Chopin International Competition. I've been following him ever since. And he was here this week.
I could get him on the web then, find him on the YouTube or something.
Well, it's 11 o'clock, and I think we'll start. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to hear Paul tell us about political matrices today. So with that, before Paul starts, will everybody turn off your cell phones or silence them, please? Thanks.
Thank
Paul,
you.
The floor's yours.
Well, greetings to all. Last week I spoke about ideology at the center of, that is, the belief systems at the center of the tribal differences, and I'm going to talk about the Democratic and Republican parties as key examples of these tribes that have such committed ideologies that they can't even talk to one another or interact with one another or integrate or cooperate in passing legislation. Because the center of ideology as a belief system is something we don't actually think of consciously most of the time, but it has a moral dimension. That is, what distinguishes ideology from just plain believing in something is the fact that there's a moral dimension to which we're committed. And we may not realize it, or it may not be in our consciousness, but it exists. And that's the reason why when you're committed to an ideology, it's very difficult to change your belief system. Well, although I did touch on these moral differences between the left and the right, I want to do it again just to underline how important they are, because though it is the moral dimension that determines the tribe. And we have six pillars or matrices or whatever you want to call them. And as you see up on the screen, the care versus harm, liberty versus oppression, fairness versus cheating, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, and sanctity versus degradation. Now, I took this from The Righteous Mind, a book written by Jonathan Haidt, and it is the result of hundreds of polls and research projects looking at the differences among liberals versus conservatives and others who are somewhere in between. So the outcome of all of this research is that of the 6 dimensions, liberals and Democrats are in the liberal column. You may not conceive of yourself as a liberal if you're a Democrat, but that's just a shorthand way of characterizing one side versus another. Not all Republicans are conservatives, not all Democrats are liberals, but the difference between them. So I guess I should call this left versus right. So on the left side, what they found was that of the 6 dimensions, 80% at least of the left priority is on caring, liberty, and fairness. And here are the meanings as Haidt defines them. Care, sensitivity to signs of suffering and need, despising cruelty. And of course, we're seeing that right now in the protests against the treatment of immigrants by ICE. Liberty, and we know over the years how social justice has been a primary priority of the left. And by contrast, still elements of social Darwinism on the right side. So social justice helping underdogs, victims, and powerless groups. Now we call them marginal groups, racial groups, and others. Fairness, cooperation, or equality. So fairness in the way of equality. And that's what DEI, right, was established to rectify inequality, diversity, equity, and so on. Authority, now loyalty is the next one. Forming and maintaining coalitions within the group, of course, and trusting versus ostracizing or punishing those who betray us or our groups. The left has been rather gentle in dealing with betrayals, and it doesn't have, may not have the kind of keen sense of loyalty that the right has been demonstrating. Authority, looking up to superiors and down to subordinates. Relationships within hierarchies, encompassing power, obedience, respect, submission, with all perceived to be legitimate. Often there's a much more casual kind of sense of hierarchy among the left than there is at the right. Sanctity, there's a lot of sanctity in tradition, and the right has been much more sympathetic, and I guess that's probably not even as powerful a word as needed to tradition. We treat objects, places, people, and principles as sacred or of infinite value. Sanctity of life, of marriage, and the sanctity of marriage and the sanctity of family are things that differ from the right and the left, because the empowerment of women, for example, has been considered a desecration of the sanctity of the family. All right. So now, if the left values caring and fairness substantially over the other four, conservatives value all six equally. So now, in the No Kings protests, do you think there's a dominance of Democrats in the crowds that come out to protest what ICE is doing? And that is, right at the outset, an example of the left's adherence to fairness and caring versus the right, you see. And it's right in front of our faces. Okay. So if we say that the right believes in all six of these pretty equally, it makes sense then for us to understand why they love the police, why they love the military, why they love family values and traditions, And it makes sense once you understand the moral pillars behind all of these ideologies. Stop and open the floor for any comments.
Could you scroll down, Paul?
The other, back to where?
To the libertarian. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Can you say anything about how religious identification fits into this spectrum or into these matrices? Does the research say anything about that?
Not usually, but possibly if you think about it, the question, and you ask yourself the question, do evangelical adherents practice some of these more than mainline Christian congregationalists? I don't know. It would seem to me, I don't think, he has said nothing about the religious part of this. But the question you can ask yourself is there any evidence that we have seen in the course of our experience that would suggest that the fundamentalists, whether it's Christian fundamentalists or Jewish fundamentalists or Muslim fundamentalists, are far stricter in certain ways than the more moderate religionists? Yeah, Harry.
The words that describe the right here, do you think someone who is a conservative would agree with all these terms? Fairness versus cheating, betrayal.
Well,
oppression?
they would not know them, and they would sound too academic. No, this is all academic stuff. If you would ask them a question, though, in other words, what do you think of, or how would you treat something, they would give you an answer that would be in tune with whatever these concepts are. I mean, that's the way they had to do the research.
No.
I mean, you don't just ask somebody, do you think you subscribe to respect for authority more than anything? No, they put it into anecdotal questions. Yes.
I can certainly understand the strong resistance to cruelty that we've seen in Minneapolis. What I didn't understand was the lack of a terrifically strong response to getting rid of the DEI. That seemed to be accepted by
Yes.
society.
Well, it's the, okay, white people, you know that white people certainly on the right have objected very much to affirmative action. And from the time it was established under Lyndon Johnson, Great Society program, and there were lawsuits about the fact that incommensurate privilege and discrimination was given to black people and other minorities, Asian people, whatever. And the point being that now there is a greater uprising among the right to get rid of wokeness. And wokeness is DEI. And so it makes a lot of sense. I mean, this has been festering for years. And finally, and so there's a lot of support for it on the right. I would say much less, if any, on the left.
I have a
Susan, yes.
comment. When I worked at Brown, I was working with very high-end donors, and among the older generation of Jews, there was a lot of support for not to DEI, because they remembered how hard it was for them to get into an Ivy League school.
Mm-hmm.
There was a quota system against Jews. It was very carefully kept confidential, but it was widely known. The same thing then with Asian students who come from cultures that are very disciplined often and are highly competitive if you don't have a quota system. So these are people that sort of fall into the conservative picture, but might in fact be otherwise very liberal. So it's just a complicated thing.
Yes, well, as I've said before, you have to see the world in terms of yin and yang. And there's, you know, the picture in the little circles that are opposite to the sides that they are found in. Yes, there are always exceptions. But the greater tendency is as described.
I guess my point is I can see the support for getting rid of DEI on the right. I can understand that. But I can't understand why there wasn't stronger resistance. I mean, I was ready to go out in the streets because of that, because of trying to get rid of DEI. And it seems that everybody just buckled under very easily. And that's what I find distressing.
Okay, Jim, thank you.
I just wondered how stable these meanings, in other words, they're subject to change at some point, aren't they? There's even in the Republican Party, there's some stress. They can't quite agree, and that's going to challenge them. I'm just wondering, you know, are these stable and persistent descriptions, or are they subject to?
Well, we know these things are operational now. I make it a personal rule never to predict the future, so I wouldn't anticipate what kind of changes would occur. We just have to see. Okay, I would like to go on once we've done this. Just take a look at the political implications as I've just enunciated. Liberals value caring and fairness substantially over the other four. Conservatives value all six equally. Does this give them a broader variety of ways to connect with voters? And in fact, that has been an issue raised in the light of Mr. Trump's election to the presidency and all of the other elections in which Republicans won and now dominate Congress. It is clearly difficult, and this is the point I've made, is it is clearly difficult for red and blue citizens to communicate with one another and even understand one another. Okay? Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about religion because that's much easier, right? All right. Religious identity throughout history has been used as a proxy for American identity and the protections of citizenship. Consider how it's been handled, for example, when the Irish came here in floods in the middle 1800s, and there was war, actually, between the Protestants and the Catholics. We look at Northern Ireland and you say, oh, gee, you know, it's hard to imagine that. Well, it was right here back in the day, and it has not gone away. Because when John F. Kennedy was running for president, there were plenty of people who didn't want to vote for him because he was a Catholic. Al Smith lost the governorship. No, maybe it was the presidency back in the 1930s because he was a Catholic. There's been a lot of enmity toward Catholics by by some kinds of Protestants, and that has not ever changed. And the question is, can they be American? Are they American? Now, according to Samuel Huntington, in his book "Who Are We," and he enunciated his vision of the American creed, and in his definition of what makes an American, he said, speaking English, being a Protestant, and so on, and the respect for law and all the rest of the boilerplate that we like, but he did emphasize the fact that Protestantism was and it is the dominant religion here in America, or it's the dominant way of. It's not the religion, because there is no one religion about Protestantism, but it is certainly the way that Christian religion is practiced. Okay, religious identity captures the socially constructed norms, conditions, expectations, and boundaries for how we practice our beliefs and respond to the beliefs and practices of others. So our identity becomes very important. And a religious, if you are a devout person in a religion, you have an identity, a religious identity. If you are a Jew and you walk around town wearing a yarmulke, so people know that you're a Jew, that is your identity, is it not? It's not, Mr. Selbst, it's that Jew, Selbst. Okay, because it becomes an identity. And the same thing with a woman wearing a hijab over her hair. So we have to respect that and understand that is identity. And now, is there a political kind of inference there? Maybe. It certainly could be. It's not so much in America, although it may be true in enclaves of religious people within America. For example, if there's a Muslim community within America and they are strict about the practice of their religion, then people who do not practice it, if women, for example, expose their hair or wear clothing that is considered to be immodest, they may suffer the consequences, and politically as well as socially. You may not elect somebody to office who you do not believe has the integrity of the religion. There are different ways that the political outcomes happen. Okay. Yes.
Wait just a second. Strong religious adherents create a boundary. That is, Muslims who believe you're not a good person unless you practice the Muslim faith could not be elected mayor of a city.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's within, it's conceivable that they might try to impose their beliefs and observances upon others.
Right. Isn't
Religious Jews.
that basically what I was saying? Yes, I agree.
Okay.
And look at the recent dissension against electing a Muslim as mayor of New York City. I mean, I'm sure there are still people who regret that he was elected, not because he's a social democrat, but because he's a Muslim. Yes.
I've been thinking about Jim's idea that some of these sort of morph over time or become less or more powerful. I think, you know, the Catholics, the Supreme Court now is majority Catholic, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and so Catholics are much more accepted than they were when the Irish first came.
Well, they are accepted certainly by some people.
Some people.
But maybe not all people.
Yeah, those aren't elected positions. And also, I think the general trend in the U.S. has been toward greater secularism, and yes, less. You know, we have almost 25% are now nuns, non-believers, and so religion isn't such a powerful tool as it used to be, and it certainly isn't as powerful in Europe as it used to be. So I think these categories do kind of morph over time.
Well, people who say they're nuns, some are atheists, some are agnostics, and some are not sure where they belong. But yeah, and secularization is taking over America, no question about it. It's proceeding rather rapidly. And churches are losing congregants, and churches are closing. Right here in Philadelphia, a number have done that already. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? If you want to make a judgment about it, it's probably not a good thing.
I think the right sees it as more of a problem. And
Yeah.
the fact that it's becoming more secular gives them a powerful push to push their religions really hard.
Well, you see, evangelicalism has not been declining to the same way. There are a little fewer evangelicals in the last polling that I've seen on religion, but not many. So it's really the more mainline Christians, the more mainline, well, the Catholic churches have been declining as well, but not the very hard fundamentalists. No, they're, if anything, in many areas they've been increasing. Yes.
So I'm thinking about David Brooks here, who's been on quite an interesting journey through his life. And sociologists, I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote Bowling Alone, et cetera, that maybe the thing that is concerning is the loss of communal threads and ties rather than religious ties.
Well,
That community is the thing that seems to be happening in Minnesota in a way that it hasn't happened in other places. That's sort of a question, Paul. Is religion a stand-in for community?
not entirely. No, religion is also a way of describing morality as well as community, and the existential philosophers have long recognized the fact that if you don't have a firm moral kind of makeup, then anything goes, and our society is the poorer for it, because then crime increases and ethical lapses increase, and you can't trust people necessarily. I mean, there's a whole lot of things about religion that cement good citizens into what they are, and when you lose it, you're also losing something in our citizenship that is valuable. Yes.
But I think research has shown that non-believers are no more immoral than believers. that there's a certain inborn genetic moral code that doesn't have to be prescribed by an old book, you know, that a lot of people have inborn moral ideas that do not come from religion.
Well, yes, some people do. We just don't know how many, or whether they are the majority.
There are almost no atheists in jail.
No, yes. There are no atheists in there are no atheists in classrooms either. Prayer in public school is very, you know, adamant at exam times. Okay, so yes.
Let me comment. I don't know whether it's just a function of the time, but you know, I identify religiously as a Catholic. My mother's family was all Catholic. My father was not. I was educated from kindergarten on in Catholic schools and universities. I refer to myself currently as a cultural Catholic because I love the heritage and I love the community. I don't believe any of the theology anymore. And I don't know, I know that I'm not alone in having that opinion. I know a lot of other, quote, Catholics who don't believe any of the theology either. But yeah, okay. No, the moral stuff that was taught it sticks. The theological stuff doesn't stick.
Sure. Yes.
I also remember when Francis was Pope, and I don't remember where in his papacy he made this statement, but I think it was when people were not going to church so much, and you know, there was sort of an outcry about that. He said that it really didn't matter if you went to Mass every Sunday. His point was that if you have a spiritual belief, and that was just as important as showing up in a pew on Sunday when maybe the rest of your life wasn't in that, you know, in that realm. But if you had some spiritual belief, he said that was okay, that you didn't go to Mass. At least that's what I remember.
Thank you. You see, I would say what you're describing, Jim, is a transition. You might have been a believer, or a devout believer, and then became less devout, but you haven't lost some of your commitments to whatever morality you've learned. Is that correct? But what about the next generation? You see, the fact of strong religious beliefs of parents being transmitted to their children is real. And I mean, you can see exceptions, of course, in all of these things, but generally that's been the outcome. And when you lose it at the parental level, it also sort of dwindles among the progeny. Dwayne, give him the mic, please.
There was a woman going through airport security. She was asked, "What's your occupation?" She thought to herself, "Well, I'm just a housewife." So she said, "None." "Okay, come over to this table, dump out your purse." He examined everything she had, and then he apologized profusely, saying, I'm sorry, ma'am, you didn't think you were a nun."
Yes. Okay. Moving on. Moving on. So what about, what are the religious implications in politics? Well, how about the fact that Mormons believed in plural marriages, and it had to take law to change that, or right now the horrible outflow of anti-Semitism, and all of the efforts that are being made to stem that. In other words, there is a great deal within the religious sector that lends itself to political action. Fear of Sharia, that reluctance to elect a Muslim in a political leadership role. Okay, so, and the appeal of the grand old party, the right to evangelical voters, that's a very well established fact, starting in the 1980s. Before that, there was the Republican Party really had nothing much to do with religion until the world changed in the 1980s. And now evangelicals are among the most fervent Republican supporters.
So, Paul, you need to center your page on the screen.
Yes, I see that. My problem is I don't know how to do that. Oh, there we go. I just found out how to do that. Okay. Margaret.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, in terms of the evangelicals, I think that your matrices that you had on the last screen, you said Republicans honor all of them equally. It seems that there's some shift in the Republicans where they're placing a lot more emphasis on authority. And so religions that really favor authority, like fundamentalist religions, they're kind of attracted to the right. And as that, I think the evangelicals fall into that category. So I just I don't know what you think of that, but that seems to be a thought that's coming up.
Well, if you please forgive me, but I have to leave this subject if I'm going to get very far in this lecture today. All right, religious intersectionality. That means that there are things other than religion that people possess, but also religion, it varies. For example, a Roman Catholic in the South may be quite different from a Roman Catholic in the North. Different, I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that may be a real thing. A black, when it comes to race, for example, a black man and a black woman may have very different ideas about how to create fairness within the political system. And especially, as I have seen in various reports, black lesbians feel that they are quite a distinct group, which they are, from just black women, and therefore deserve more political fairness than they've been receiving, and so on. So that's what intersectionality is. It's more than one thing at a time, and it then does make a difference where you are in a group that's intersectional. You can be a Jew and not believe and not practice Judaism. You can be a Jew and not believe in God. You can be a Jew and never said a prayer in your life, and you are still a Jew. So that is really the existential problem that Jews have had, they've always been considered strangers. And Judaism is not a religion necessarily. And Jews were considered a separate race, as were Irish and Italians at one time. But Irish and Italians became white, and Jews never did. As a matter of fact, there was a book written called How Did the Irish Become White? And the answer was by hating black people. Once they joined that group, then they were accepted. I'm not kidding you. This is there for you to check out. Okay, so Jews apparently are an ethnicity as well as a religion. Religious identity, citizenship, well, all of these things, I guess we don't have time to get into them very much. Let's talk about racial identity. By objective measures, we live in the least racist times of the many centuries, from the formal equality of rights through the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to the election of the first African American in 2008. But racism is still evident in the thoughts and actions of many people and often of state agents, as indicated by some cases of police brutality against black people. For many, such incidents are indicative of a racism that is institutional in U.S. society, where racism is a constant undercurrent even when it's not visible to the naked eye. The key to understanding the theory of the institutional nature of racism is the notion of whiteness and white supremacy as a reaction to color blindness and the false perception that race no longer matters. The claim is that color blindness fails to acknowledge the omnipresent hegemony of whiteness, the way that white identity's domination is diffused in all the power structures and social relations in the USA. Many claim that the rise of African Americans like Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, or the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas in positions of power is a sign of the U.S. society moving beyond white supremacy. This masks a new type of racism. In 2018, Kanye West was characterized as Uncle Tom for his sympathy for Donald Trump. The tribal thinking here is evident. All black people, as avatars of their identity, are expected to think in the same way and hold the same beliefs. To suggest otherwise would mean to see them as individuals with their own judgment. Under this narrative, being black is becoming more of a political ideology and less a skin color or an ethnic background. I'll let that sink in. So, is race a biological reality or a social construct?
You asking us?
Both.
Yes, it is both.
And it's becoming less of a biological reality where we have more interracial progeny and get to the point where I know a lot of people, it's hard to tell whether they're black or white.
Yes, and that is true. Okay, why is white supremacy still so potent?
Because it's equivocated with power, that white equals power, and that's why there's so much potency behind the fear of that.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Probably the fear of losing power.
Probably the fear of losing power.
Yeah.
The whites losing power.
It's not just power. You know, it's not power, because
Influence.
if you want to go to college and they take a black person ahead of you, or someone hires a black person for a job that you are qualified for, more qualified, actually, that's not just power. You're losing something important. So don't just, because I am a proponent of not just talking about power. Talk about all of the things that matter, the advantages that you get, the doors that open for you and would not open for you under a DEI program. There are, you see, you're really losing something. Really, and I've seen that right after the back in the 1960s, right after Lyndon Johnson and all of the affirmative action things, and doors were opening for black people, and in fact they were taking black people to the exception of white people who were better qualified. I was at the time an administrator of a hospital. And I had an opening for an assistant director. And there was a young black man who applied, and he just graduated from graduate school. Didn't have any experience. And I was interviewing for the assistant director job because that's, you know, he applied. And I said, well, I probably can't give you employment. He said, that's all right. There's so many other places I could go. And I thought, here's a guy who has no experience, nothing in the way of a qualification for the job, and yet is going to get one. And that is the way people get turned off when you try to be fair in the way that America has tried to be. All right.
I think a lot of this has to do with pecking order. We like to feel we're better than somebody.
I'm sorry?
I think a lot has to do with pecking order. We like to feel we're superior to somebody else. It's in our nature.
Well, that's part of it also. The thing that I react to is this notion of cultural appropriation. Should society accept the concept of cultural appropriation? That is, are you allowed to dress like a Mexican person or an American Indian? What is cultural appropriation? What have you appropriated, ma'am? Go ahead.
It's a way of appreciating another culture.
Well, it's not called appreciation. It's called appropriation.
Well, having acted on cultural appropriation from time to time and had a good time doing it, I would say that it benefits cross-cultural understanding.
I say your vote was no. No, you should not accept that. Okay.
What about white people?
Oh, not to say I vote no that you can't do it.
Yes, I know that. Susan.
There are so many examples where cultural interest becomes cultural appropriation, and I think the most offensive of them is when white people put on blackface and pretend to be black, pretend to be minstrels, and what they're doing is making fun of the very people whose culture they're appropriating. So it's pretty complicated.
Yes. Did anybody here see a Netflix series called Younger? I recommend it. I saw the whole thing, several seasons worth, and it's really great. It's about a 40-year-old white woman who who gets divorced, has children, gets divorced, and can't get a job. She's too old, and people won't hire her. So, and she's very attractive, and she can pass, and she does. She applies for a job and says she's 26 years old, and she gets the job because that's who they hire. And for several seasons worth, her secret is safe. And of course, she learns to be a 26-year-old, but she's leading a double life. And it's a very interesting and charming series, so I recommend it. Younger, but she has appropriated youth and acts like a young person and has all young friends at work. And they all think she's 26. Any rate, let's go on. Gender and sexual, tribal and identity. Okay, political scientists use the term gender gap. Whoops, I guess we're not going to. Yeah, we have 10 minutes. Use the term gender gap to capture the persistent differences between men and women in reference to voting behavior, partisanship, policy preferences, and political ambitions. Today, women comprise slightly more than half of the voting age population in the US, but have exceeded the vote share of men in every presidential election since 1980. Women vote more often and at greater proportion to their share in the population than men at every level of government. The gender gap is particularly pronounced within and across communities defined by racial and ethnic identity. Feminists would highlight the patriarchal roots of modern societies, the gap in the average income of men and women, the disproportionately small presence of women in positions of power, from governments to executive boards, the threat of sexual violence they face, the patronizing or undignified attitude of many men against them, the sexual objectification in popular culture, and so on. Now, let's talk about men. Some men, on the other side, point out that being a man means facing a significantly higher risk of suicide, of being the victim of violent crime, of getting a harsher prison sentence, of losing one's child in a custody court, of falling behind in school, of doing the most dangerous jobs, of being portrayed as a psychopathic criminal or a goofy loser in popular culture. More people than ever see their life through the prism of their gender, or consider their gender to be in a disadvantaged position and require social or political change to mitigate that. And there's been a movement of late to deal with boys who are getting missed in efforts to give more academic advantages to girls, as well as some social advantages. So this is kind of a division in American society right now, based on identity. Now, of course, we get to the LGBTQ, and this is clearly an identity, different kinds of identity, sexual, asexual, transgender, intersex, celibates, and so on. Lots of different kind of groups, but all having to do with sex or gender. And and having a stake in political change, and have been very active in that. And now a backlash. In fact, I think I have an article that I took out of the paper. That shows that support for LGBT is declining among the general population. It was rising. There was a great deal of support for that, for those folks. Yes. In the New York Times, January 19th, it says, Americans are turning against gay people.
Americans or right-wing Americans?
Americans. Yes, of course.
I think one of the key issues in relationship to these identifiers is that American society actually made a fairly slow and painful but long-standing progress towards space for lesbian and gay people in the variety of ways that they live and express themselves. And when the identity became more complex by including the additional letters, and people assumed that they all belong together, I believe that that's where the discomfort or the unclarity and the dislike came from. I mean, I think our society had time, or there was some catching up that happened up through a period of time for lesbians and gay people. Mm-hmm. That is being eroded because of the need of identification for others, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and so forth. I just think historically that you can see two different things happening there.
Thank you. According to this article, it says the decades-long rise in the acceptance of gay people in the United States peaked around 2020 and has sharply reversed since then. In the 2 decades before, the 20 years before 2020, visibility, recognition, and legal inclusion of gays and lesbians progressed in lockstep. Larger and more prominent pride parades, rainbow-lit landmarks, federal legalization of same-sex marriage. That progress translated into something remarkable. Americans' bias against gay people declined faster than any other bias ever tracked in social surveys. But increased the analysis of 2.5 million responses from Americans collected from the beginning of 1921 through 24 revealed that progress had not only stalled, it had reversed. In just 4 years, anti-gay bias rose by about 10%. And I won't read any more of that, but you have an issue there. Yes.
Isn't that a function of our current president making that much more acceptable, so that the underlying feelings that were probably not expressed or
that was before Trump, though. This remember it said basically it started before Trump. I don't think it was all about Trump, because not that many people. I mean, he doesn't have that kind of influence.
Do you think it was
and it gets into the question of what explains this decline in tolerance. So I won't say that because we are out of time. So before we leave, I will give you the floor.
Do you think it would be because of the fringe element of the sexual evolution? I mean, I remember people like Jon Stewart, who is certainly a liberal with his talk show at night, saying they've just gone too far. It's nuts that they, it's too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It could be. Well, it's just, I don't know. We can't solve that problem here, but we should at least know what's going on. And that's why I bring it to you. We're talking about identity politics, and this is certainly central to that. Yes, Susan, could you give her the phone? The mic? Yeah.
We discovered something in my faith community, that there is conflict among the people grouped in that LGBTQ. The lesbians do not wish to have their bodies changed. They feel entirely adequate to be the sex they find themselves to be. And they find that they are sometimes actually assaulted, but insulted by trans folks when women are and trans women are put in the same jail cell or accommodation of some sort. They used to be male, now female, is assaulting women. I had no idea this was going on, but evidently it is in Britain, and it's a known thing, and it's a cause. So, my God, who can keep up with all of this?
Well, change is pretty normal in America and pretty rapidly covering us. We are just awash. I mean, in identity politics in so many different parts of our lives. And I actually made which I don't think I've got the time to read, but I actually, before I came to class, I just jotted down notes about how much is going on in identity politics in America today. And certainly the phobia against transgenderism has been pretty steep. I mean, there's so many people who are really not happy with that whole idea. And of course, the administration is trying to prevent it from happening by limiting medical care for children. So it's we used to know that America had identity politics. We knew that because all of our lives there have been identity politics, whether it was black people not having civil rights or American Indians getting screwed over, or women getting, having problems, or Jews having problems. We always knew it, but we never called it identity politics. And we never equated it with tribalism. So this is all new, and it's happening quickly and powerfully. We are awash in America with tribalism and identity politics, more than we've ever experienced in our lives. We mature people. Would anyone like to say anything more? I don't have to leave yet.
I've sort of been asking myself, how then do I figure out what tribe I belong to? And what I'm coming down with is that I and just about everybody belong to a whole bunch of tribes. You've got the race tribe, you've got the religious tribe, you've got the political tribe, and on and on and on. I can picture one of these Venn diagrams of intersecting circles,
And somehow all those circles, there's just one place where they all intersect. That's where I am, that's where you are, you know, wherever all your circles come together. But I don't think you can say you belong to one tribe anymore.
There were, in the Inquirer today, there was an article about Sheriff Street, the son of the former mayor, who is running for Congress in the seat that Dwight Evans held in our district. But the reporter writing this said something that just made me do this. And he said, and he's running in a district in the bluest city or the bluest district in America. And I thought, whoa, is that really true? But that's what it said in the newspaper. I don't remember if it was the bluest city or the bluest district. Huh? That's what it said, bluest district. So we are living in the bluest district in America, according to this journalist.
And I think he's also a Muslim. Sharif is.
That has nothing to do with the district.
I know.
Okay, anyway, unless anybody wants to make a speech, we're done.